On August 28, 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. prepared to speak to 200,000 civil rights supporters of all races on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He was going to speak about the racist decisions that the government and many people had made, and how he hoped that someday all the world would be equal. Even as a child, Martin had been discriminated against the color of his skin and had seen how all black people were mistreated.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. He went to Booker T. Washington High School and skipped 9th and 12th grades. He entered Morehouse College at age 15. Even as a child, he couldn't turn his head without someone looking at him distastefully. It didn't matter how smart you were, every African American man or woman child experienced racism.
Beginning in the 1840s, Jim Crow was used to refer to practices, laws, or situations that meant the physical separation of black and white people.
The term Jim Crow originally came from a black character in an old song and was the name of a popular dance in the 1820s, but it came to represent a painful reminder for blacks that they were not treated equally.
Gandhi was the person who inspired Martin Luther King. Like MLK, Gandhi was a peaceful protester. He was protesting for India's freedom from Britain.
Frederick Douglass was born into slavery and wanted to abolish it. He was an early civil rights leader and was another person who inspired Martin Luther King. He was a strong writer and speaker.
Not all black leaders favored a peaceful approach. Malcolm X thought that blacks should be separated from whites so they could have their own ideas. After a while, he started to work with civil rights leaders. Before he was assassinated, he said he was sorry for pushing more aggressive ideas.
Rosa Parks was an African-American civil rights activist who played a large part in bus boycott. In 1955, Parks refused to give her bus seat to a white man. She was arrested for disobeying the law. Before Rosa Parks' trial, she stayed in jail for 6 months. After her trial, she paid a $10 fee and a $4 court fee. In 1965, Rosa Parks got a job as an African-American U.S. representative.
The Montgomery bus boycott was a social protest because of the policy of racist segregation on buses. After Rosa Parks was arrested, most blacks in the Alabama city stopped riding the bus and organized carpools with people who had cars and agreed with their cause even if there was almost no room.
This was bad for the bus service because not enough money was being made, and soon they would go out of business if the black people didn't ride with them. Eventually, the bus company gave in and blacks were allowed to sit where they wanted on buses.
Blacks could not sit at Woolworth lunch counters when whites could. The whites got their food faster than blacks. Protesters demonstrated what was right as a team by sitting at the counters anyway, and if one of them was arrested, another would take their place. Sit-in protesters would just sit there, waiting to be served. If they were served, then they would move on to the next counter. If they were not, they'd wait until they were. Who were these people in 1957, 58, and 1960? They were people of justice, a mixed group of whites and blacks. They would sit there, not budging through all the shouting, shoving, and harassment.
In Alabama, many African Americans attempted to march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama's capital. They marched in protest of not being allowed to vote. On the first march, the 600 protesters were attacked by local police.
The second march on the following Tuesday was also attacked.
By the third march, the federal government had sent 2,000 troops and 1,900 members of the National Guard to protect the protesters. Persistence had won.
Martin Luther King Jr. stepped up to the podium. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Over the following 16 minutes, Martin Luther King voiced the concerns, the hopes, and most importantly, the dreams of the African American community, drawing his speech to a close with,
"So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California.
But not only that. Let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and to sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last."
When I walk beside her, I am the better man. When I look to leave her, I always stagger back again. Once I built an ivory tower so I could worship from above. When I climbed down to be set free, she took me in again. There's a big hot sun beating on the big people in a big hard world. When she comes to greet me, she is mercy at my feet. When I see her pin her charm, she just throws it back at me. Once I dug an early grave to find a better land. She just smiled and laughed at me and took her blues back again. There's a big